Hi, this is Teresa Van Woy, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
I love this. One of the things, Teresa, that I love is I love Benicia, and that's where you live, and you've lived there for a long time. I'm from there. I grew up there, so it's a big part of my life. Whenever I get to go up and visit, it's like homecoming, but even better because it's just such a beautiful and tranquil spot. What do you love about Benicia?
Oh, there's so much I love about this place. I love the downtown, the Main Street area where they close the street down for holidays and people open their shops, and everyone just seems so friendly here. The schools are great. It's just a wonderful community.
It's a gorgeous town in the Bay Area. It's unique in that First Street ends right at the water. There's not many places that have that, and it's just a beautiful place to live and breathe.
Hmm.
I've got you on not because you're from Benicia, in part because I always want to celebrate our hometown, but because you've written your memoir and it's called Wildflower. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and we'll go from there?
Okay. It starts when I'm 7, when my mom shows up at our house in Florida in a camper to take us on a summer vacation. So she piles all 9 of us kids in. We go across country and end up in San Francisco. In San Francisco, she decides that she's going to stay there. And she keeps 4 of the 9, sends the other 5 back home to our father in Florida. So San Francisco is my new home. We're homeless there and start off at a homeless shelter. And my mother does suffer with mental illness, and she became very abusive and had me basically take over the role of caring for her and the family starting at the age of 7. So that's the gist of my story, and it is an inspirational memoir of overcoming that and not getting stuck in the same cycle of repeating abuse and poverty.
Yeah, yeah. Let's kind of examine where you're at now, and then we kind of work back from there. By the way, everybody should watch your Martha Quinn interview too. She does a great job with you. We're going to have a little more time, so that's why I want to spend some time kind of in the here and now. Now you're a doctor. I believe you're married to a doctor. You live in this great town. Everything's all fantastic, and yet you were raised by a mentally ill woman who broke her family apart, and you were a 7-year-old parent. These things are crazy. And my 3rd grade teacher said, you have to have Teresa on the show. She's the most amazing person I've ever met. And she's met me. But when you hear someone give you that accolade, the most amazing person they've ever met, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it is coming hard.
Take your time. It's fine.
So let me just say, this is all very new. My book has been a big secret of mine, hidden. And until just these last few years, I started writing it, and it's very, very fresh. My book's been out for 3 weeks, so I still do get a little emotional. But to hear that, I mean, it's amazing. Mrs. Ross is, definitely to hear it from her, especially like what a wonderful woman she is. And it's kind of neat because I'm hearing that a little more lately, like personal messages of people who have read my book. And, it really does mean a lot to me.
You're smart. You know how to do things. You're a podiatrist, so you know how to see things through. So I'm not at all surprised that you wrote a book. But are you surprised at this reaction? I mean, you're really bearing your soul. This is this memoir of this extremely challenging time. But it seems like you've pulled it off. Like, people love you and everybody is so excited. I mean, I've done a lot of shows on Benicia, folks, but you have generated the most excitement out of all of them. I mean, heck, I was a guest on my own show today, and hardly anybody cares about that. But you made a difference. What is it about your book? What is it about your style, your writing, your prose? What do you think it is?
I think it's just being truthful and vulnerable in the book. It might make it easier that it's written from a child's perspective. So I really put myself into the story and relived a lot of it through my writing, and wrote while I was experiencing or reliving some of the nightmares I lived. So the story just kind of flowed from my heart and my soul, with one goal in mind the whole time, is to really try to inspire others. And at first I was thinking this book is written for anyone who was ever in my situation. It's for them. But now I see, and the more I was writing it, that really the book is written for a lot of different people in a lot of different aspects.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that people are going to take and put their own struggle into yours, and they'll be interchangeable. Spending a little more time on this, I'm actually doing some writing myself right now, forever working on my book. That moment when you get into and you're in that moment, you're in that memory, and you start to kind of have the ability to look around, and you realize that there are more things there. And I know for me, my adult brain kicks in and I go, oh my gosh, I never realized, because I'm just living in the moment as a kid, right? But as an adult, you look back and you're like, oh, that's a horrible, horrible thing to have to do to a kid, or whatever the situation is. It takes me a while to write these stories because there's just so much going in it, and I become very emotional. That has to be the same thing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, going back and reliving this, I really, saw myself in a different way. And, I think a lot of us were always hard on ourselves. And I saw, like, I would go back and write these stories and see my little girl self. And I felt this whole, like, new love and appreciation for that little girl, that I just wanted to go back myself to these scary, scary moments I never, ever wanted to see again in my life, but actually wanted to go back and give myself a hug and be there for myself. And then when I go right now, Teresa, now look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God, this is so disgusting. I've gained so much weight. Ugh. It makes me think, like, God, you're saying that to that same little girl. Like, why are you being mean to her now? So it opened my eyes up to even myself, the way I look at myself now, a little better.
Yeah, I was hoping you would go to that realization, because I do the same thing where, like, with the perspective, you gain it and you start to understand the damage that is caused to you by your mother, by life, whatever it is, all of these different things that create these, and it's damage that you took without you wouldn't even know that you were taking it because you were too small. But then you look at the current you, and you're like, gosh, I am so unfair to these people. I'm so unfair to myself. All of these different things that we carry with us because of these traumas. Is it helping you still as you try to deal with this stuff?
Yeah, it is. It's helped me in a lot of ways of really just how I see others. It actually, there's a lot of talk about, because I went to a Catholic school and my big Catholic upbringing, I do bring God into the book a lot. And I'd say now I feel much, much closer, like, spiritually. So that aspect too. And I recognize, and you always hear, like, oh, you have guardian angels, or you have someone looking out over you. And I'd always think, like, well, no, I don't. I don't have anybody, even though, I did feel it a little bit in San Francisco. But now it's almost like I feel them around me. I know it may seem kind of strange, but whatever it is around me that's protected me all my life, I'm almost becoming more aware of them in today's reality.
Did God give you more than you could handle as a 7-year-old raising kids?
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, it wasn't necessarily the chores as much as the abuse, and
Right.
Yeah, I question that always. But,
Yeah. And I think about, like, guardian angels and these kind of concepts too. And it doesn't mean they're all good at it. It doesn't mean that they all have the same level of care. Maybe some of their, it's like dads and moms, totally different approach to getting the kids through life. And so I think about that with guardian angels. What if your guardian angel is a hard ass dad who wants you to pick yourself up and, and then you got the other guardian angel that's like the grandma who's like, I'm just going to bake cookies for you all the time,
Uh-huh.
What kind of guardian angels did you have, do you think?
As a kid, I think more protectors of, I was on the streets a lot in San Francisco, and I saw all kinds of things. I think it was more just, maybe if it was putting something into my ear, like cross the street, giving me that intuition, or, I don't know. I didn't, keeping me strong and alert. And I think that's just part of being on the streets as a kid is, you're always aware of your surroundings and you kind of always are alert of what's going on around you.
Do you feel like your neighborhood protected you a little bit? Like they knew that you were too young to be out running around, and so they sort of kept an eye out there. Probably didn't take care of you, but didn't, they were aware of you, maybe? Or how would you characterize it?
I'm not sure about the neighborhood. I think I kind of got the feeling that they really didn't like our family that much. So I'm not sure about that. I would say maybe the cable car drivers kind of looked out for me and my little brothers. They're 5 years younger than me. Maybe they're always nice and, but as far as neighbors, maybe not so much.
I want to mention Brett's comment here. He says, hey, the book is a great adventure through the eyes of a brave young girl. As I read it, I found myself wishing I was as adventurous as her. What do you think about that?
Well, that's fun. It's when I look back now at all the adventures I had, it's sad for me now to see my kids don't like to do as much stuff. And to see now, and I hate to bring it up, but the electronics and all of that. And I really wish that they had that adventurous spirit like I did as a kid, more so. So that's a fun comment.
Yeah. When I grew up in Benicia, our house was right on the edge of town. It was on Tennies, and then our backyard was open. And so it was just straight out to the hills. And for those who don't know Benicia very well, it's right on the edge of sort of like when the Bay Area stops and like the just hills start. And so beyond my house, you could walk for 10 miles and not hit anything potentially. And you could go out there and you could shoot guns. People rode dirt bikes all the time. The cops didn't always like it. So you got to run from the cops and they wouldn't really be able to stop you. All this adventurous living. Our kids don't necessarily do that nowadays. Part of my thing that I figured out is I did a lot of things outside of the house because of, like the way my dad was at home. I didn't want to be at home because it was terrifying and, not good for me there. So in a lot of ways, I raised myself because I didn't want to be around the abuse. And I've paid another cost for that as an adult. Would you attribute the same kind of lesson? I mean, with all of the terrible things that are happening with your mom, was it better to be on the streets while left to your own devices?
Oh yeah. And that's why I was any chance to be out of the house, I would be. And yeah, I said it in the book, even with all the crazies that I encountered on the streets, I still felt way safer than at home. Absolutely.
Well, there's also a betrayal when someone that apparently loves you, does the things to you that cause the damage, and it's one thing to get it from a stranger, but another thing to get it from someone who's supposed to be, and then oftentimes can't. I'm sure your mom had times when she acted like she loved you. I'll tell you a funny story and see what you think about this. So my dad was horrible, and it was always horrible. And so I didn't know what a loving family was. And so I went over to my friend's house. We were like 16, 15. We were making Christmas cards by taking pictures. And we were posing and having a great time. And the dad came home from a business trip. It's like a Friday or whatever, right? And he kissed his wife and said, I love you. I've missed you so much. And I thought, who is he kidding? It's about to go down, And then he's like, "What are you guys doing?" I'm like, "Oh shit!" Now he's looking at us like we have to get out of here. And it was all wrong. He genuinely loved his family, loved his kid, and was desperate to know what we had done. We had laid on this man's Lincoln Continental naked, and did these pictures, laid on his car. And he's like, "That's hilarious. Can I help you guys do some more pictures?" And I was like, when something as horrible is going to happen, I thought it was all a put on, but it wasn't. It was actually like what a loving family is supposed to be. What is that? Like, what frame of mind does that put you in when I bring up that kind of example?
Oh, well, it was the same for me. I mean, the thing is I didn't always expect something bad to happen. I knew other people had good lives. And to be honest, as a kid, I honestly thought we were the only ones in the world. Nobody else had a crazy mother. Nobody, yeah, they were poor people, but no other kid had to raise the family. And so for me, I was alone. I was the only one in the world. And I couldn't let anybody know that about me because, I didn't want them to know that I wasn't normal. So when I would go to another person's house or see how they were, or I wasn't expecting the worst. And what I was doing was I was, dreaming and admiring and, taking notes and just knowing, like from an early age, knowing this is what I want. This is what I want. I want my life to be like this. I want to have kids that I can love. So yeah, it was a little bit different.
And then at some point, you make a turn. I mean, because you become a podiatrist, and it's not easy to do that academically. I mean, you've got to really have the chops to do that. I mean, it's one thing to be smart, but to develop the discipline to study enough to be eligible, even to have the opportunity to go and have a hard life of studying. When do you think you figured out that this was not only a reality that you could do this path, but you thought, oh yeah, actually I can do this? I mean, at some point you got over the hump with the becoming a doctor thing. So when would you say that happened?
Well, I always knew I wanted to go to college. And so that was just, one thing I had, which was different than my other siblings, I'd say. I knew I wanted to go to college, and I felt, it seems like because I went to school with a lot of like very affluent families, and it seems like that's what it took. But going to college right out of high school, and of course paying my own way and being just lost with no guidance. I took a microbiology class, which I did not have the prerequisite, the biology before, and somehow I got in, and I absolutely loved the class. And I'm like, wow, I want to do something, science related. And I mean, really, I was in micro. It was more of at a community college with a lot of, associate's degrees, right? And so people in the classes were thinking like, oh, what kind of job? So I was thinking, well, maybe I would be like a dental hygienist, and because that's kind of what the types of jobs people were looking at, something like that. And I got to thinking, I'm like, well, as a dental hygienist, that's what you are, and that's your job, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I love mine. I see her twice a year, if not 3 times. But I just thought like, well, you can't move any further than that. Like the next step is a dentist. So why not be the dentist? And so that's what it was, just those thoughts going through my head of, then I went on to a 4-year college and biology major and, pre-med. But that's kind of where the first thought came in about that.
When did you know you're going to make it?
Well, I got accepted to every school I applied to. And
were you surprised by that, or did you know that already?
No,
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't think I'd get accepted anywhere.
Yeah.
And I just, it's always, I had that self-esteem, like, but I'm going to try my hardest and work my hardest. And it definitely, I would say, probably took me a lot more work maybe than your average person as far as studying on the weekends and everything. And But one thing about me is I don't give up. Is I really, and I think that's probably one of my strong suits. Is I really push hard and push through things and see them to the end.
Yeah, makes sense. Because because you can trust yourself to get it done, and even if it doesn't happen for whatever reason, you will know that you've done everything you can to do it. I completely understand that. When you're looking, so first off, let's spend some time here. You go to community college. There are so many parents and kids that are freaking themselves out, killing themselves over getting into their right first choice or whatever it is. And I'm a product of a junior college. I've got more than one degree. It's such a great path, especially for someone like I had no idea like what I might do. I wanted to do everything, and so I didn't know what to do. And I took every kind of class, and I really kind of took my time going through school. But what are your thoughts on just in general? It's not really on the book, but I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of you have such a non-traditional path to becoming a doctor. It doesn't usually starts on there. I was 7 years old raising my siblings on the mean streets of San Francisco.
Yeah. So what was your question? Sorry.
The question is basically like, just what are your thoughts on approaching school as more of a, you don't have to go to the perfect school. For most people, I mean, doctors may be aside, but if you're going to get a degree, I've got a degree in mass communications. Does it really matter what school I go to? And then I got there because I took a bunch of classes and I kind of sorted myself out. Cause like I didn't really know what I was doing. I just kept going to school and looking for where the A's were. And I ended up in mass communication. But what are your thoughts on, someone who's young and stressed out, or a parent who's like worried about the path? What would you say to them in terms of what the path is versus when you look at your crazy path?
Yeah. Especially if you're doing it on your own. I would say community college definitely is the way to go. And as a matter of fact, I wish, my daughter would have gone to community college first just for financial reasons. But I mean, especially if you can still stay at home and, save some money and, why not? And I honestly told my daughters it would be great for them if they could take a year off before going to college and travel. And that's a big thing that I love is world travel. And then I found out, because I was talking about the Peace Corps, I found out, you need a degree to be in the Peace Corps, I think. So, but something. So, my oldest, who's now at Boise State, she was last summer, she was signed up. I volunteered after the earthquakes in Nepal. So she signed up with the same group and was going to go to Mexico and spend the summer. But of course, COVID happened. So she's not, but she is going to study abroad next year. So
every kid should study abroad. I've never met anyone who's done that and said, "Oh, I hated it every second. It was a horrible idea." It's always the opposite. I begged my daughter to study abroad. She wouldn't do it. She wouldn't go. In addition to the thought on school, why the heck are kids so stoked about going to another state school in another state? Nothing wrong with Boise State. No commentary against Oregon State, whatever. But why would you leave California to go to a state school unless they are like the only school that does your thing? What do you think draws kids to a place like Boise State or, Ohio State from California, where you can get, there's no better public university than Berkeley. Here it is, 20 minutes away. Granted, you want to go somewhere, go to UCLA, go to San Diego. There's all kinds of great schools here. What makes them want to go out of state for a state education?
I know. I think it gives them that sense of being independent and doing it, being further away was part of it for her. And I think for a lot or if the school has a reputation, and I know Boise, not that Dylan was into football, but they have a big football. But I think maybe it's the independence or just, finding a school that is just completely different from where you are. I don't know. She also had her cousins there, so that was a big pull for her.
Okay. It can be random sometimes where, and we also have 18-year-old kids deciding what they're going to do for the rest of life and spending, I don't know, $250,000 to figure it out. And it seems like such a crazy proposition sometimes, when you break it down. I want to ask you about, you seem to have so much love. People love you. You got there despite your upbringing. Did you just, I know for me, a lot of times I think, what would my dad do? And I do the opposite. Like that was sort of how I parented, you know? So like when I
Mhm.
yell at my kids, I'm like, my daughter, she'll tell you like, I have to yell at you now. I'm really disappointed in you, you know? And I'm just like so calm and I deal with it, but because I just didn't want to approach it the way my dad did. How did you get to be such a loving person who's so affective in terms of how people respond to you and how you clearly just love your family? That doesn't make, I mean, so many kids come out of these situations damaged beyond repair when it comes to love.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I don't know. I've always loved kids and animals. And it's just, that's my soft spot. Um, and I mean, what made me come out loving more than maybe someone else in my situation? I have no idea. I always, knew part of my dream was I couldn't wait to have my own kids. And I always imagined daughters, which is kind of funny that's what I ended up with. Um, yeah, but to answer like how was I able to? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Does it
I
surprise you
think
to be where you're at in terms of your ability to love?
I don't think so. I think that I've always, um, yeah, I think I always kind of had love. Like I loved and cared for my twin brothers, and yeah. So I don't know. I didn't grow up, even though maybe in the book it might seem like it. With a lot of hate in my heart. It was always a struggle for my mom, at least, like between love and hate. Um, but I think even as a young girl, as a kid, I was able to see beauty in the world. Like I was able to appreciate things, especially in nature.
What about your siblings? Same story?
As far as love, and
How they do it, how you guys love each other.
hmm yeah, yeah, it's really amazing. It's a miracle that out of 9 kids, that we're all doing well and have loving families. That no one is being abusive. And we as kids would talk. We'd get together, every summer, and my mom would always, she'd talk about her past and about her mother, and we'd be like, what is she talking about? Doesn't she like, can't she see she's doing the same thing? And I think having my siblings around and having conversations sometimes makes us all aware, like, oh my God, we never want to do that. Like, what if all of a sudden we were like mom and we didn't even realize it? But having it voiced out, where it's a conversation, I think it makes you more aware. Or, maybe it's just that, her mental illness, that caused it. But I know that was part of it. It might be more than that. So, yeah.
Mental illness is tough. One of the things I like to do, try to give people perspective. So like I have PTSD, and if you could see my PTSD on my shoulder, you would treat me differently than when my PTSD like affects my behavior or causes me to act irrationally or whatever it is that it does for me. If you saw that, you'd be like, oh my God, of course, your mom doesn't act right. Look how unhealthy she is, but we can't see it. And just like when my ankle hurts, I try to walk straight and I can, and then I roll it over and I can't walk straight. It's like same thing mentally, like I'm able to walk these 15 steps in a normal fashion, but then my brain, my injury overtakes me. It took me a long time to understand that about addiction, about mental disease, and to not absolve my dad of his problems, but to at least be able to understand it. Is that possible for you with your mom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can see for sure on her. And I see her as a tormented person who's just suffering a lot and just reliving these nightmares in herself. And even like my siblings and I would talk about it, like, like poor mom, what happened? What's going on with her? And I swear it's almost like she had it so bad as a kid, say like my age and my little picture on the book when I'm 7, that I feel like everyone can respond to trauma differently. And I think for her, it just, it's almost like she froze. And that little kid went so numb that she wasn't there anymore. And it's the way we see kind of my mom. Like my mom then, this monster or whatever, and this took over and just hid that little kid was hidden inside of her. And the reason I say that is, well, she is like, she can be a total monster, but on her good days or weird days, whatever, that little kid will come out and just play like a little girl, you know, and we see it like, wow, you know, there she is. And, you know, she does still like these really eccentric, like she'll paint all of her fingernails a different color, bright colors, you know, and that might be just the mental illness part of her, but it's also like the little kid that sometimes wants to come out and play.
Your mom's still with us. She must be a pretty advanced age. How's she holding up mentally? I mean, these things don't tend to get better as you get older.
No, and she's 90, and she's actually on her last days now. So I'm going up to Alaska next week to hopefully see her before she goes. And you know, just she struggled all of her adult life and can be just as mean to everybody. Either she likes you or she doesn't, and that goes across the board to anyone. And you know it if she, you know, she lets it be known. And she, you know, in her later years, she did develop dementia, and through her dementia, where she doesn't really remember us, she did remember that she hated me, which I have to laugh about now, but it's not funny.
Right.
But you know, we went for her 89th birthday last year, and all of us, eight of the 9 kids. My sister couldn't go, and yep, she knew right who I was, even if she didn't or pretended not to know everyone else. So,
how do you process that, though? I mean, why even go up to Alaska to be hated by your mom? I mean,
I know.
What's wrong with you?
I know. Well, I mainly go for my brothers. So one of the twins, Jonas, he lives up there, and my brother John Eric, he lives up there. So I go to visit them. Usually when I go, Jonas's twin, Josh, he'll come along, and Alaska's amazing. I love that state. So we go and we have a lot of fun, and yeah, you know, even my siblings, some of them, they, oh, you need to go and spend time with mom, and I really don't want to. Not to be mean, but you know, I do want to go say bye. But yeah, no, like even last year, like at 53, she brought me to tears when we're there to celebrate her birthday. So yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah. When my dad passed, one of the things, I didn't really miss him because I didn't really like him, but I was glad that he no longer had the ability to hurt anybody else.
Yeah.
You know, and that was the biggest relief. And that was when our relationship got better. Not because he was dead and gone, but because it's like, I don't have to worry about what he was going to do to somebody I cared about, you know? And I know that has to make sense with you. And I'm curious what you think you'll experience once your mom passes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you know, and it is very fresh right now. So a lot of those emotions are coming up. And I always thought, like, what's going to happen when mom dies? Well, how am I going to feel? And I always felt like, you know, and I would even tell my siblings, like, the best thing, because she was getting older. But I was actually embracing her dying. And it wasn't for my reasons, like, because she's such a witch, but because the torment. And I'm like, she can finally be free of all of this. And, finally like let go and like maybe have love in her heart. And, but I honestly was, now that it's right here, it's a little bit harder, but I always thought like death would be the best thing for her, just to free herself. Yeah. So hope that doesn't make me sound like I'm evil or anything, but
yeah, I mean, it's if she had cancer and she was in pain, you would wish the same thing for her. Even if you loved her and she was a great mom, you would just like,
yeah.
I mean, but it's not an easy existence. It's almost cruel to have her around for 90 years in this condition. We're talking with Teresa Van Woy, and her book is called Wildflower: A Tale of Transcendence. We've been purposely spending some time on the back end of your life because there's a really good interview that Martha Quinn, the VJ from MTV, did with you, and I didn't want to just focus on these areas, but I do want to kind of go back further now and talk about the book. And well, let's spend a little bit more time on your adult self. This is a hard journey, and I know that you got stick-to-itiveness. I know you're going to work through because you're a doctor and you're not afraid of things, but it's not easy. And you're not known for being an author either. I mean, so you're doing this. You really ultimately have to say to yourself at some point, I don't care if this thing sells. I need to do it. Why? Talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, it was, it was hard getting started. I was back and forth with it and throwing it down and saying, oh yeah, this is crap. I'm not going to do this. But I thought, if I could just touch a couple people's lives, from my story, if I could change maybe someone who is in my situation where now they're not hitting their kids or, I think when you're in that situation, sometimes you do feel trapped or this is all you have, this is all you know. And I think it could be easier to repeat the pattern than what people might think. And if I could just touch one or two people's lives, maybe they're the only ones who pick up my book and read it, then to me, that would be worth it. And that was my initial thought. And then, of course, writing it and all the healing that has happened with me, even though I always thought I don't need, I had a doctor friend I worked with who would go to therapy. And she'd leave therapy and she'd cry and, and we'd be after work doing our charts, talking. And I'm like, why would you put yourself through that? Like all therapy is doing for you, not to diss therapy. I mean, I know it's good for a lot of people, but why would you put yourself through that? And I felt like, well, I'm strong. I have my life. I love my life. It's awesome. My family, my job, living in Benicia. Like, why would I want to go back through all that? And so that was like when I started and I'd put it down. I'm like, this is bull. I'm not going to, why? Like, I'm past this. It's buried. Why dig it up? And now look at me, I'm crying, But then, the more when I'd pick it back up and I'd start writing again and actually like looking at myself as that little girl and, definitely there was healing and understanding for my mom and her torment. I mean, I know writing the book has helped me kind of like, even though it's, how can you ever understand anything like that? But it made me a lot more understanding and sympathetic and compassionate toward her. And I mean, just imagine having 9 kids too, like that's a lot.
Yeah,
but not that that's any excuse. I'm not making excuses for her, but there has been a lot of healing. So I'm glad that I stuck with it, even if I'm the only one who benefits from the book. That's amazing because it really has helped me.
No, that's so a friend of mine is John Krotek. He's got his own podcast. We're both veterans, and he wrote a book about his sexual abuse. And his cover of his book is very similar. He's got 2 pictures, one of him like the week before and like one the week after, and one you have this normal looking little kid, and the other one after. You're just like, that kid is disengaged from life, and you're looking at one picture, so you got to read a lot into it. But that they do tell that story of this damage that he took. And, then he goes and does all this poetry to get through it and explain it and everything. And it's powerful stuff. But it's a lot to have to live off of that book and try to put life into it. Do you want to tour this book? Like, do you want to be sitting on Oprah's couch and talking about this for the next 5 years? Do you want to become the Wildflower lady? Or are you, I don't want to say you're done with the book, but do you need the book to be any more successful than it already has been?
I don't need it to be. No. I would like it to be, yeah. And I'm not sure that it's really successful right now, but I think the more people I will tell you this, I've been getting a lot of personal messages sent to me about people that read my book, even without any background or past that I had. And actually saying like how the book has helped them, or even how the book has helped them to look at people differently. And so these are people who I consider, like normal, they're, or from a really good life. And if my book is making some kind of impact on them, and anyway, yes, I would love to sit on Oprah's couch.
Okay. And be the Wildflower lady.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. There's a little bit of ego in there, and that's fine. Becky Ross, again, my third grade teacher, I love to bring this up. Her book inspires others to help guide others with similar backgrounds. And I love that. I want to ask the doctor in you, though, when you see something broken or something that's working and your book is helping them, do you feel obligated to do something more to help either that person or to create something else to create more wellness?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think even before I started writing the book, I always have that in my heart. And I would love, like, I see, especially if the book takes off and becomes successful, of, making a stand of some sort, or making something that's really impactful in some way, doing something. I don't know what really yet.
How was your relationship with your dad? I mean, obviously he goes back to Florida, so he's not around much, but how did that evolve?
Well, we were really close. And even before I left, when I was 7, I was his little girl. And I, growing up in San Francisco, I didn't really see him that much or talk to him that much. But yeah, I would say we've always been close, and my dad's gone now. But there was a special relationship between us for sure. And I think especially, it tore at his heart when he found out what was going on with my mom.
There's an airplane flying overhead. I live right by John Wayne Air Force. I was trying to wait it out. The hard part too with your dad is that he has to go somewhere else. He is not allowed to be part of this family for whatever reasons, life reasons, your mom reasons, whatever. How did you deal with that as a kid? I mean, it's one thing to say he wasn't around, but how do you deal with that?
Well, that was hard. As far as, you mean when I was a kid, about him?
Yeah,
not being
as a
around?
kid, like your dad, you need him and you're in this desperate situation, but you can't have him. So how do you reconcile with that? How do you get over that?
I mean, there were times where I would question, like, why isn't Dad coming, or dreaming that one day he would come and rescue us, or, like, where is he? And I think just, all of us, like my other 3 siblings I lived with, it's almost like we put him up on a pedestal because we had it so bad with my mom, even though he really wasn't around. And we just, we'd get so excited if my mom took us to Florida to see him. I'm sorry, my thing is making noise. And yeah, I mean, it was like we never really had a grudge or anything against him. And when I went back and saw him, it was like, it's almost like he didn't know that I had grown up and I was still the little girl since he last saw me.
Yeah, that's the parent's dilemma, right? Your kid is always older than you realize.
What's that?
It's a parent's dilemma. Your kid is always older than you realize. Like, you're like, oh, that's right. You're 25. You have a checking account. You don't need me. You always want to tell your kid to put a jacket on or
Yeah.
whatever. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the book now. So when you're writing this thing, what moments stood out for you that you discovered as you were writing it? Where you're like, oh my gosh, and you unlock a whole new part of your memory. Talk a little bit about some of those things.
Let's see. Well, so a lot of the moments, were there were a lot of major events, obviously, in the book and every chapter. So, and people would ask me like, well, God, how do you remember that exact thing or time? And when writing the book, these things happened, but they might not have been at that exact time and space or that scenario. And, a lot of the abuse, say, it happened all the time. And it wasn't just like, oh, well, that's the time I'm writing about it. No, that's just one of the times. And it's all very clear that also what helped me was every couple of weeks, I'd get on the phone with all my siblings and we'd all be on a conference call. And I would read to them what I wrote so far. And it was kind of fun. Like, there's a lot of chapters in the book that I wrote originally that aren't there anymore. The book would be so long. But I would be telling my story and they'll be like, oh my God, we were doing this, and so it was, the times on the phone with my siblings, there were tears, there was a lot of laughter, and it was kind of like, and it's a good way to look back on stories when they're so horrific that you can actually laugh at them. Like, and there's one simple story is I was writing, and it's not in the book, about, my brother John Eric and I, we did a lot of adventures together in the summer. And we were in Carlsbad Caverns, and there's a cafe underneath in the caverns. And we were so hungry that we went and we were stealing ketchup packets. And then I ended up with some Miracle Whip packets, and they were like the best thing in the world. Like, oh my God, these are so good. And we're eating all the Miracle Whip packets. And so I read that chapter to my siblings, and my two oldest brothers are there laughing in the background going, oh my God, like, you guys were stealing Miracle Whip packets and we were stealing the sandwiches. No wonder why the lady didn't say anything to us, because she was feeling sorry for y'all. But,
That's hilarious. Normally, I like to ask a question like, what would you say to your younger self? But I want you to talk to the next kid in line who maybe grabs this book. Maybe they're an adolescent, maybe they're a mom, maybe they're 7 and they read this book. What do you want to be able to say to them?
never give up on your dreams. I would just say, because I know it's hard to believe in yourself if you really don't. But that's what I would have to say, is really believe in yourself, because if they are in a similar situation as me, then they're all they have. Because they're not going to have teachers, or maybe, hopefully, after this book, maybe there will be teachers for them. But they are on their own. People aren't going to believe in them. And I would say and here's the thing that I had to struggle with a lot too, is I know, like, when you're in that situation, you're stuck and there's really not anything you can do unless you wanted to leave your family, which I know a lot of kids don't. So it's like, what are you going to do when you're done? Like, do you want to live like this? How do you see yourself? And get that picture in your mind right now, and keep it, and never, ever give up on those dreams. And that's what I would say, is keep following your heart, follow your dreams. Don't listen to anybody if they're negative. Just believe in yourself.
I've worked a lot of time in conflict zones and talked to a lot of young men who don't even have that. They can't even imagine having a dream. They're literally in survival mode. And that has proven to be true for a lot of like gang members, young men that they live for the moment. Life and death are interchangeable for them. Everybody they know has been shot. One of them said that prison is an extension of their community.
Mm.
These folks can't dream. They can't afford that. How do we help them? How do we help someone that can't even get to the point of having a dream board to put up?
Mm-hmm. I mean,
you want to be the wildflower girl, so, lady. So.
I know. Yeah. Have to start somewhere, right? Well, I would say, I know it is tough. And that was what I had that's different is I went to a good school. And so I could see the other half. I wasn't always just surrounded with my type of environment. And I mean, as a kid, I think that might be hard to do. But, if they had an opportunity to pick up a book and read, not my book, just other books that, can take them away from their life, something like it's some kind of escape to shut the rest of the world out and build maybe from that, or, just, and this is where I think the teachers, if teachers can play such a huge part in someone's life. And I know even as an adult, if you go to a class or a seminar or something and they say, who was your real life role model as a kid? And I was thinking like, oh my God, I have nobody. But like, how great would it be to say like, oh, Mrs. Ross, right? Mrs., you know what I mean? Like, what if you were that person, that teacher? And I think every teacher out there now can make a difference. And it's hard to say like how to give someone a dream unless they have some kind of escape that they can, and maybe it is through a book if they can read, or maybe it is, I would say nature is huge if there's, and I know if they're in the inner city, but I would go to find a park if they can, but I'd hate to, a park outside of their community, if possible, even if it's like taking a bus or riding their bike, just getting away from their environment, which might not only be their home, but their community, away from the drug dealers and, what's on the streets, and find their little happy place. 20 minutes on a bike can take you far.
Yeah, it sure can. I mean, I lived on my bike. I was all over Benicia, up and down those hills. My Fritz is barking, so that's fun. I want to close up. First off, I want to say everybody should get Teresa's book on Amazon. You see the link there. It'll be in the show notes. If you're listening on the podcast side, it'll be in the notes there as well. There's the picture of it. Adorable little girl, 7 years old, Wildflower. And here's what I can tell you. People in Benicia are raving about this book. They love who Teresa is. And so all you've got to do is buy the book and you will have this experience. It's already built in there. The emotions are already there. Everybody's going crazy about it. So I think you've got a hit in your hands. We just got to keep getting you out there talking about it. What do you want to say in closing? I mean, tell us, here's your chance to talk to 90 different countries. We're 90 different countries full of people that listen to the show. So What do you want to say?
I would say, like I said before, please just never give up on your dreams. And I would look at the world and look at the people that are around you through your hearts and not your eyes. Like, try to have a little bit of, just have compassion, and, never give up on yourselves or on others. And if you can, even lend a smile or a helping hand. And the other thing is, don't think you can point out the people who may be troubled, because there's a lot of people you really can't tell what's going on inside of them. So just be kind to everyone.
Yeah, I like it. I like to say, try to default to grace, because you just don't know. Try to be gracious and grateful, because everybody's suffering, especially right now. Everybody's suffering with something. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see what's next for you, whether it's even more book action or the help group, or whatever that you start. I know there's more in there for you. So thank you again.
Thank
And hey,
you.
Benicia, here's your favorite new author right here.